man, I want something more progressive than Garlington and more progressive than what's done at Spencer. And interestingly enough, I had already drawn the boat. Mm-hmm. I had it in my mind for, at least 5-8 years. And so I showed it to him. He says, yeah. And we refined it from there. So.
And how did it start out? Like, what was the origin story?
Too much alcohol.
Really? Okay.
Says if God wanted us to have fiberglass boats, he would have given us fiberglass trees.
It's for fishermen. It's not for taking the wife and the wife's friends.
I think that it's a really, really pretty boat.
And then there was a blur that went by and ended up in the cockpit, as far as if I can remember correctly.
Hey, everybody, it's Anthony from Hook Optics and the 64 Case and Blood Money. And this is the State of Sportfishing presented by Billfish Gear and Hook Optics. Today we have Steve and Stevenson French of Applied Concept, a boat design and jig manufacturer. And let you guys take it away, Steve and Stevenson.
Tell us. Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure. Always enjoy interacting with people from the industry. Get the news out about the state of things. So I'm Steve French, founder of Applied Concepts, and this is my son Stevenson French, who's vice president. I started the company shortly after high school, actually, as a freelancing business where I did a lot of technical illustration of about anything that was needed. But I had started during high school working in a boat yard, and people often ask if that's where I learned how to design boats, and my pat answer is no, that's where you learn how not to design boats, because everything that's nasty, rotten, rusty, broken, and doesn't work comes to get changed. And that year, I was 15, going on 16, formed in my mind. It just cast the concrete of what I would never do. And so all the materials that salesmen would come along with later that said, this is great stuff. If I had already dealt with it in the boat yard, trying to dig it out with a screwdriver or whatnot, I already knew my stuff from at least that perspective. And then shortly after, I went to work for AMF, and AMF was a sporting good company that owned several boat companies. So I got the pleasure of going to work for the Slickers families, kind of leave off into AMF, where I did Robalo small parts. So I designed consoles and T-tops and things like this to begin with. And shortly thereafter was given an opportunity by their lead designer, Jeff Seiler, who went off on his own to do race boats, to do my very first own boat. And it was on the Hydrodyne twin-stepped hull called the F22. And from there, my career it was just so cool, so fun to have the backing of somebody who was a senior naval architect believe in me. I think it was 18 going on 19. So I designed, built the plugs, built the molds for that boat, and it, did all kinds of wonderful, fun new stuff that I couldn't do in a big corporate environment. And so kind of took off from there. And I worked for lots of different boat builders, including Cobia and Hydra Sports, who had me do one of their first big offshore boats. 1985. Stevenson was, I don't know how long he's been with the company. He was literally under my desk as a toddler for that crazy project. And he's been in it, from a family perspective since. And so I spent several years doing production engineering, where I would draw by hand, pen and ink the old way, and I would loft by hand from those drawings up to full scale, and then direct the tooling. For example, when I was director of engineering at Pursuit in 1980, would have been 86, 87, I ran the tooling department. Things back then were not CNC. You'd take a paper drawing and go out and do a 12-inch grid on a big board, and then build it up out of wood and Bondo and make it, all the way out to a 1200 or 2000 grit finish, polish it. And so I spent my first 7-8 years doing that kind of thing before I ever got into custom. And I considered S2 Pursuit to be a very nice quality, well-run business, but I still wasn't meeting end-use customers, and I didn't feel that the design was being influenced by tournament fishing people. And I'd heard about this guy by the name of Richard Garlington. and went to visit him. And I was 22 going on 23. And he knew that I'd already had 7+ years in specializing in composites. Anything that I could do to keep boats from rotting and have lighter, stronger, stiffer materials. As I say, kind of going back to the first year of working in a boatyard where I didn't want to be doing things out of, plywood and balsa and, the things that rotted. And he said he wanted to take a sport fishing boat company that it was already on hull number 4 out of mahogany into the composite realm. And man, you talk about an opportunity. That was absolutely fantastic. So here I've got Richard Garlington over my left shoulder, John Rybovich over my right shoulder, Dan McCarthy as kind of my mentor on all things bigger, faster boats. And we just had a blast taking Garlington. That's 1988, 89. From wooden boats to one of the world's first all composite boats. And, we built the molds for what is still being built today there in 1989, 1990. And so from 1991, when Richard Garlington left that company, I incorporated Applied Concepts, went off on my own full time. And so today we're still running this company, as a family business from that set of roots, so to speak. So.
Nice. And you don't have any formal like a degree in for any school or anything? You just kind of.
I do not. No.
That's so
my company's
cool.
history, I have employed over 40 degreed engineers, and for many years I actually tried to save enough money to go back to college to put some letters after my name. But after having FAA DERs and MEs and PEs and guys even with master's degrees, I came to conclude that my hard knocks degree in practical material sciences and hand lofting was more valuable to me than all those things put together. And not to degrade degrees, but in this environment, it has served me better to be a hands-on person. So.
Yeah, I got you. And could you explain what lofting is? I've heard the term before. I don't know exactly what it is. So could you explain that?
Sure. Yeah, because I guess I'm the last generation. So lofting probably goes back to, if you believe in Noah, pre-Noah days, and it is the process of taking your idea and putting it in a small space in front of you. Be it on parchment or on paper, and in my days it was on mylar with pen and ink. And so you could see the whole design, be it automobile, airplane, or boat, and then you have to take that and scale it up. Now today, you roll the mouse and it scales in and scales out. Mm-hmm. But back then, your scale would say be 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. So you would have a grid on your paper, and then you go out in the shop and you'd take and make a really, really large drawing, 60 feet long, or maybe in a foreshortened version, 20 feet long, and you'd make these 12-inch grid. And everywhere that a curved line crosses that grid is where you'd put a little brass pin. And man, I had holes in my kneecaps from, you not look in the right direction, you come over and you actually put your knee on one, or you're pounding these things into these boards off an MDF board, and then taking a long, curvable batten, mahogany, or something where you've trued up this batten, and you're recreating the curve that you've seen in your mind in a small space in front of you, and now making it full scale. And I actually self-taught myself in lofting from an old airplane lofting handbook. I think I still have it. It's like in my time capsule for my grandkids. And around the time of, us taking on computers, 1994, 95, and doing the CNC jig thing, because I just didn't have enough time to be lofting at all the different boat builders up and down the coast, we started seeing, less and less people actually know how to loft well. And back in the old days, the days of Omi Tillett, Warren O'Neill, and Lane, guys like this, you weren't a boat builder unless you know how to loft and loft well. And today we've got a few guys that still, I think Mark Willis knows how to loft, and I'm sure Mike Rybovich knows how. But with the guys like Sonny Briggs retiring and whatnot, this lofting thing this is it.
Yeah, somebody once told me that Billy Holton was kind of like the last guy around the Manio area that was like the last one that really knew how to loft a boat well. Yeah, interesting. Stevenson, how was it coming up, and was it always a foregone conclusion for you that you were going to do this, or did you just kind of figure it out?
So we were raised really as kind of boat builders. One, we were always on the water. We live in Southeast Florida, so fishing and diving and all that stuff. That just came natural. But being on the boats and stuff, I mean, we come from a long line of artists. My dad, obviously, with this, and my grandpa was an artist for Disney and then a wildlife artist. So art has always kind of been in our blood. And I would probably argue that I would have the most of it out of my other three brothers. And so kind of like out of high school and stuff, I was more into graphic design. I did a lot of Photoshop work, creative stuff. We were all in bands and stuff. So just, t-shirt art, just really neat stuff like that. So I did some college for graphic design. And then kind of after that, I started poking around doing kind of the artwork that you see, on Applied Concepts, social media stuff. Or like the colored profile arts, the boats and stuff. I'd get hired on by Applied Concepts kind of as a freelancer while I was working for other guys doing that stuff. And then I've just always loved boats, and it kind of just trickled in from there. I mean, like Dad was saying, I slept under his desk growing up, and I can remember when I was little, just late nights he'd be working on something. I'd be like, oh man, yeah, you should try doing this. Have you thought about taking these lines and moving this? Or he's probably like, oh my God, kid, go back to sleep. But
some of his drawings when he was like 5 and 6 are still some of my favorites.
But at the same time, I've always just loved kind of looking at the eye of shapes, and so I kind of just fell in love with it after that. After the art stuff, I really saw that there wasn't a big necessity for the pretty artwork side in our world. I mean, it's a very, very niched market just to begin with. So we started toying around, kind of teaching myself 3D modeling, doing a lot of tutorials at night, for software programs and stuff. And, then it kind of everything just kind of fell in line. Started with very simple stuff. Still as a freelancer, I, still worked for other companies doing things. But if they needed extra hands, I would work with some of the other employees at Applied Concepts doing like shower module, 3D model jigs, very basic consoles, leaning posts, stuff like that. And then at one point, I got an opportunity working with some of the old employees. They felt that I would be a benefit to the team, and kind of started, at the bottom. And now, man, I pretty much run the 3D modeling gig.
And probably worth noting that I don't remember why, but I had a thing. I never wanted people to think that any of my kids had the silver spoon and would just enter my corporation.
I was literally just about to ask how it was for him, to start at the bottom like that. That's so important.
I wouldn't hire him. I told the employees, the former vice presidents and the other designers, I said, you guys are seeing what he's made of, but I'm not going to have anybody in my company say, oh, he's just here because he's the owner's kid. I said, I want him to, have his own stuff, prove himself and let the team decide. And the team came back to me and said, we really want to hire your son. And that probably didn't feel great as a son, but I'm really glad it went that way because he is a seasoned designer. I mean, he had to go under the scrutiny of multiple degreed industrial designers, professional engineers, naval architects, and always, perform. And he's just, the best of the best. So
another thing, did that. Obviously we're trying to jam a life into, a podcast, but, another thing too, is that we grew up as boat builders. Not really. I use the word unfortunately, but it's really not. But unfortunately, Dad felt that it was best for us to learn, that side hands-on, which is always
the way he did.
But yeah, a lot of itchy, sleepless nights.
Wait for at least $1 an hour though.
Yeah. Grinding fiberglass and stuff, and but man, we've come a long way and learned a lot boat building, that's for sure.
How's the dynamic now? I know with at least in my family, the son sometimes will start, has maybe an ambition, more of a, maybe not ambitious, just more of an imagination at this point of what's possible. Is that, or does he push you now, or do you guys go back and forth, and is there a lot of arguing? No
arguing at all. It is such a blessing to work with my son.
That's awesome.
It is often more, we're waiting for customers to come along and really utilize the amount of creativity we have to offer.
Yeah.
Like my second son, who's a twin, Sterling and Steele, both have worked in boat building, and Sterling has his own business doing composite stuff. And he and I are currently working on some high-tech aerospace stuff. So our capabilities in both creativity and fabrication go way past what the sport fishing community wants to do. So if we were to be unleashed, as the company is named, both Stevenson and I would, I think, have a lot more creative stuff to offer. I watch what he sketches on the side when he's bored of a particular project, and he's got decades of ideas out ahead of him. So. All
right, well, let's go ahead, Stevenson.
Yeah, just to jump on that, it's a good balance, because sometimes I almost feel like I keep him grounded a little bit.
Yeah.
Growing up in the industry, I've seen this industry is definitely slower to move forward innovation wise than others. And kind of like Dad just said, I've seen stuff that he's drawn, back when I was, still crapping my diapers, that could come out today and people be like, oh man, that's nuts.
Yeah.
It's still like 10 years down the road. So kind of seeing that stuff, I'm like, hey, let's utilize some of that, but let's not shock people too bad. They won't understand it. So let's take, parts A, B, and C of this one and throw it out there, and people will swallow it, that pill, and, really enjoy it. And then we can bring the rest in, kind of trickle it in more as a business aspect of it, I guess, than kind of just throwing things all at once out the window.
It's certainly, a slow, like turning a big ship with this industry. Like I remember coming from, in I would say, I guess the early 2000s, when I think you guys had a lot of influence on, when Spencer started coming out with the more lean back, low profile houses, compared to the more boxy, traditional Carolina boat, when they started building, the more sleek looking boats. They used to call them Euro style or something like that. Yeah. And then people were freaking out. I remember being like, people had not horrible things to say about it. They had like real reservations about the look of that boat.
It's really sometimes tough on the design side, because people with no salt in the game, boy, they sure do have opinions.
Oh yeah, for sure. How did Spencer was kind of the first one to come out with that real, and I guess Garlington to a point.
Garlington would be the first.
Yeah.
And time is the vindicator. So the brands that we are most known for today are the ones that we were mocked for. And I mean mocked.
Yeah.
People came in and spray painted names on the jigs. So, and the graffiti wasn't, it was funny, and I could take it with a grain because I knew the future. It's like, I see the future. So when we did the first Garlington 44 Express, there were no boats that looked anything like that, and I got laughed at. And then when we did Spencer, they said this will be the last one of these we ever do. And F&S, same thing. Hull number 5. They said, that's what that guy wants, but we'll never do another one that looks like that.
Who in amongst did the builders come to you with a client with an idea, or was it the client that really pushed that sort of look, or did you guys, how did that change come about, amongst say those three builders?
So I would start out with Garlington. 1985. Richard was a progressive. He wanted to make the newer, more modern style boat, which Dan McCarthy, who was an industrial designer, not a naval architect, he had a passion for automobiles, and Dan really got the ball rolling. But he still only did simple curves, but he was doing some very beautiful boats. I introduced the idea of clay modeling and compound curves into the industry through Garlington, and Richard gave me the space. He says, show me what you can do. And I said, all right. So on hull number 5, I clay modeled it, lofted it, built it, and that was a 63. And then afterwards came the 58, 61s. So those were the first really progressive boats that were styled with automotive compound curvature, twisting forms, not simple plywood shapes. And in that case, that's Richard Garlington driving the bus. And then Spencer was a customer. It was actually John Bayless's boss. And John Bayless was the captain, and his boss wanted a much more progressive looking boat. And I remember being there 2:00 in the morning, and I'm sanding foam and shaping stuff, to get every detail right with John, over my shoulder with a sketch pad, noting how to do all this. I thought this is so bizarre, and now we know why.
Yeah.
And then with Jim Floyd at FNS, it was his customer who said, man, I want something more progressive than Garlington and more progressive than what's done at Spencer. And interestingly enough, I had already drawn the boat. Mm-hmm. I had it in my mind for at least 5-8 years. And so I showed it to him. He says, yeah. And we refined it from there. So
gotcha.
It's kind of a mix.
The quote unquote, I remember them being called a lot of those boats ended up in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rican edition FNS. Yeah. So some of them.
Interestingly, I can't tell you who, but we might be doing something for a gentleman who spurned on some of this for an up-and-coming brand that could really be one of the prettiest boats on the water, and Stevenson is the genesis of that style. So
cool.
Really excited about that.
Cool. Well, I just that was such an interesting time for the industry when that's changed, and now it's very common. The boat I'm sitting on right now has a similar look, and you look around the marina, and even the Vikings nowadays they're getting more rounded and sleeker.
It's a great look.
Yeah.
It just flows. And just like we were talking about innovation, it's slow to take off, but man, it's sexy. It looks fast just sitting there. That's probably one of the more things you hear, from anybody is, man, that boat looks like it's going 50 knots just sitting there.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you guys and the builders and the owners of these boats stayed the course, because who knows what our boats would still be looking like now if we didn't have any forward thinkers in that aspect. So yeah, I think that's really incredible. I guess moving forward, as we talk about designs and new looks, the materials have changed over the years. It's not traditional plywood everywhere. Some guys use composites all the way down to the bottoms of the boats. Where do you guys, is there a happy median there? Or is there still area or still space for the traditional wood hull combined with maybe a foam topside, or where do you guys fall in that? And where do you see the materials taking us?
Well, I would say what the most common right now is usually wood hull composite topsides. That seems to be the go-to for the majority of the builders, at least the ones we work with. Of course, there's we're composite guys. Mm-hmm. We design for everything, but as far as what I grew up doing, I've personally never built a wooden boat. I've been immersed in composites since I was a little kid, using Nitacore, core cell, testing out, myriads of different types of even foams, and there's good ones and bad ones out there. But I would say right now, wooden hulls, composite topsides, that seems to be the go-to. A couple builders that we're working with right now, are leaning more towards composites, mainly probably the price comparison. I think that was probably the biggest variable right there was, well, let's just, the majority of the surface area is the hull. Let's do wood there. We know that we can build, solid structures. The sound there, you'll get into arguments all the time with people on, wood hulls are better than Corsa or core hulls, and they pull more fish and all that. But right now, with how crazy prices and costs and stuff are, they're almost comparable. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to see a little growth more towards full composites, and of course to get something to mention, I guess, would be you kind of hear some bad negative stuff about like composite hulls from certain people. You can almost take like bad plastic surgery. Well, you only know that person has bad plastic surgery because you can see it, you know? And, you know, sometimes what ends up happening is, you know, wood guys use foam with the mindset that it's comparable to wood, but they can't be.
The physical properties are so different; they have to be treated differently.
Yeah.
So on the topics of structure, sound attenuation, you know, stiffness, performance, full composites have more potential opportunities.
Okay.
But there is so much superstition in the sport fish realm that catching fish with a wooden boat is still and you can build a phenomenal quality all wooden boats. So why not? But you know, if it comes to longevity, just hands down, I think some of the composite boats we built today could be here 500 years from now.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys will say, well, I'm 65. What do I care if it lasts another 20 years? Yeah. And that's why we're still building a lot of wooden boats. And I tell people I love the smell of wood. I just wouldn't own it. But we're glad to be designing, you know, currently composite boats, composite and wood boats, and soon an aluminum boat. So
it's certainly its own animal, you know, dealing with the wood. Not that I've had any issues with this boat particularly, but you know, people have had, you know, major issues. It's just something that you need to be aware of, and it's you know, and it's, I guess, with the composites, you if you choose the right composites, you know, you can kind of alleviate some of those issues. Interesting. So, you know, going through, you know, with materials and things like that and design, like, how, with obviously, like, I think the underlying message so far that we can agree on is that it takes a lot to change things in this industry. But one thing that I've been wondering, you know, over the, you know, people with these bigger power plants and, you know, CAT and MTU and probably MAN coming out with, you know, pretty 12-cylinder, 2,400 horsepower engines. How much further can we utilize this traditional monohull sport fisher, you know, to take advantage of all the horsepower? You know, like, it seems to me, you know, we talked about, you know, trying to jam 1900s or 2200s in this boat, the 64 case, and from people that I talk to, some people say it's going to be a rocket ship, and others say that it's going to be a point of diminishing returns because the Hulk is only capable of so much. Like, obviously, FNS has kind of been at the forefront and maybe trying to push that a little bit more. And I know Richie Howe has done a little bit of a longitudinal step as well. Like, are we reaching the limitations of the traditional monohull sport fisher as far as a performance aspect?
So interestingly, we're coming up on about the 100th year anniversary of the invention of sport fishing boats. You know, prior to that, boats were commercial fishing, and then guys started going out for fun. And all the way back then, we had 3-point hydroplanes, we had single step, double step. So in the world of hydrodynamics, you can call it either basic hydrodynamics or supercritical hull dynamics, where you start unwetting surface areas in order to make the horsepower to weight ratio less reliant and lean more towards wetted surface areas, becoming what's called increased pressure. So step boats are now commonplace. I remember when I did the step boat in 1984, it was the only step boat in the entire Miami Boat Show. Kind of same thing. Oh, these will never last. I think we sold 200 of those boats that year. Wow. And now, up in this realm, we're seeing horsepower available to make stepped hulls worthwhile, and FNS has done a great job of kind of proving that is real estate worth owning, and lots of other people are coming along and doing similar things, and I think we're going to see some nice changes in that realm. But to answer your question specific to, are we going to see, I think your question is along the lines of, are we going to see the monohull kind of fade into the past while new shapes take place? I would certainly invite it. We've been at this point for a long time. I think in just the last few years, we've seen the horsepower just allow more stuff to end up in the boats and less attention be put to a horsepower to weight ratio that goes into the 60, 65 knot range. Now, some people say, well, it's crazy to go that fast. Why would you want to? It's dangerous. And I would agree on certain respects, except that that's where hull forms can begin to, with new inventions of hull forms, you can make those speeds make sense in certain sea states. So we invite it. We're ready for it. It's not going to be a new thing. It's going to actually be a reinvention of some of the older things that were done in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. But our sport fishing community has to ask for it.
Yeah.
While the Aussies are all over it, the Australians are all over it. Americans have to ask for it, or we will be in this spot for longer than we need to be. So,
what sort of challenges are presented from a hull design standpoint when you want a boat that can run at 35, pushing 40 knots, and then it has to stop and slow down and kind of perform a completely different role at 6 to 8 knots? What does that?
Great question, because many of today's stepped hulls have a window of, I'll just call a window of uselessness. They don't really, they can't, pull plastic baits at high speed for wahoo, for example, because it just don't do really well in that window. And even some drive systems like jet boats have windows where they perform really, really well, but with the traditional shaped hull, they have a window of almost uselessness. So it's mission critical criteria, and we start all of our projects with defining what are all the criteria important to the fishing type and style. So I'd say when you have a boat that really does well all the way through the fishing window, which can start at live bait trolling all the way through high speed trolling, and then pick up and do a good cruise in nasty seas, and then maybe have that super top speed and say, hey, it's a bluebird day, we can go all the way from here to West End in no time at all. A boat that can do all of those things is probably going to rest in what's considered the supercritical hull dynamic hull shape forms. And that goes way outside of today's normal envelope. And there's a good race that should be on for who can do that best, at least in order to see the industry progress in hull forms.
Interesting. And then, moving forward, this boat that I work on is 64 feet and 85,000 pounds. And I just, there's a seems to be this emphasis on trying to get the boat lighter and lighter. And I'm just like, man, I love having 80,000 pounds under me and what I would consider, I think that the hull's designed pretty nicely, and I remember working on the Billfish, a 62 Spencer, and it was 85,000 pounds. And they were just with that incredible hull, the combination just seemed amazing and in crappy weather. And, I guess if you're going to Costa Rica where it's always calm, it doesn't matter how heavy your boat is, but is there an ideal length to weight ratio, that you see? That is, I always thought that if I were to ever design a boat or build a boat, it would be with this similar length to weight ratio. Just because I just feel like it feels so good, Yeah,
there's only two ways to handle, the compression of waves. One is weight and one is form. And there is a sweet spot where form and weight can come together. Nobody wants to be on a flying potato chip, in 5 to 8 foot seas, right? So if you're going to be light, you have to have a hull form or a form that does not even impact the waves, which could be the future, right?
Yeah.
We designed things even 20 years ago that took into account that possibility. So
something like a hydrofoil or something like that?
Foiling boats, cats and cat foils and swaths and sea sleds, things that came up in the 60s. And so back in the traditional form of a boat, just a monohull that fits a decent number of staterooms and that kind of thing, we are in a really sweet spot right now where we could lighten boats up quite a bit, but going 45 knots, you have to pick the day for it. So I think we've come to a fork in the road where people are going to say, I want to do something progressive, or I just want to be very traditional, and there's not much room to go left or right from that if you want to stay on the water.
Yeah. And then
you know, a big driving factor on a lot of stuff too is, you know, at the end of the day, even though, I mean, you're not a boat builder if you don't have a passion for it, you know, but at the end of the day, it's a business making a living for their crews, their families, and a lot of that plays into part with, you know, how much are you willing to risk? Being a boat builder, it's tough. Being a custom boat builder is really tough. Is really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it from a boat builder standpoint. You know, if you're a business owner, you want a handful of clients. You want quite a bit of clients so you can keep the revenue coming in. Well, with custom boats, you have 1, 2. If you're a big timer, 3 boats going at once. So that's 3 clients at one time. So the risk versus reward is very tough, and that might be what drives the slow innovation, in this industry. Is that guys say, well, listen, I need this boat to perform, because if this boat performs, I got 2 more guys that after this boat will, they like the ride, they'll go on it. If you go too progressive, you're risking too much. So, I see, without going too far off tangent, I would say the next thing is, weight. You can always go lighter, but the thing that some people are scared of is ballast tank. That's something that we bring up, often, where you make a light boat, but then for the good days, and when you get into those snotty seas and you want to be squatted down to the water, well, you fill the ballast tanks up and you hug the ocean. So now you have a light, efficient boat, and a good, let's say just automatically you have a good design hull form.
Yeah.
That's given. So you have a good design light boat that's efficient. Well, I mean, who wouldn't want that on a beautiful day? Mm-hmm. Now take a good hull form, suck it down to the water, and now you feel comfortable. I mean, you feel safe. You're squatted. You're heavy. And you're not eating it.
And that's something that goes all the way back to World War II.
Ballast tanks are nothing new.
It's not an idea that we came up with, but we've been promoting it for over 25 years. And only a few projects have actually said, let's do it, because it does sound different. But imagine if the boat you're sitting in, you could drop 20,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And actively put it back when it's snotty out, right?
Yeah.
That would pay for itself systems wise. And you're talking using seawater.
Yeah.
So it's not like a stabilizer, some other mechanical system. You're literally talking a pump.
I mean, and people use, I've used fuel to do it, in certain occasions. We hold 2,200 gallons, 1,400 in the back and 8 up front. When I know it's going to be shitty, I put a lot up front, and I get really, really wet, but nobody down here seems to mind, But
enjoying the ride more.
Yeah. So I mean, people that I think obviously the idea for most people is to have. It's always been to keep seawater out. To actually introduce it into the boat is a hard thing to wrap your mind around, but it makes perfect sense,
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, again, it's like ballast tanks are nothing new. I mean, Freightliners, everything, they all have ballast tanks. I mean, but like you just said, it's to wrap your head around sucking in water, filling your boat full of water, which, sounds scary, but obviously they're close. It's like filling your bait well.
That kind of goes back to the wood versus composite.
Mm-hmm.
If you think subconsciously about what you're thinking about putting all that salt water in a wooden boat, your brain resists it. But if you're in an all composite boat, like they are 86, a double down, boats like that, it would be an integral tank. It doesn't mean anything, at all in terms of safety. So back to that innovation side, I could see that becoming more popular. People trying to, push lighter weight and utilizing that, before kind of like the next step of
that makes a lot more
hull modifications.
I mean, for somebody who kind of likes traditional sport, I really love traditional sport fisher, but that kind of makes the best argument for how are we going to take something to really fly and still, I remember being when we used to have a Viking, I used to say, man, this thing's built like a tank. I mean, it'll take what was I gonna say? It can take a lot more than I can take, or the people can take, and I think that that's where I think that would be a perfect solution, and not allowing the people to take it, because I mean, with the materials we have now, and you could build things incredibly strong, and
we know how to make boats that are closer to 1,000 pounds a foot.
Yeah.
Especially like interiors right now are incredibly heavy. Mm-hmm. And yet we go back, I think it was 2000, we built a Briggs with an interior that you could pick up an entire stateroom as an individual, because we were pushing lightness, right?
Yeah.
And you mix those two technologies. So what Stevenson's saying with Ballast from, the 30s and 40s with modern honeycomb construction. And you could very easily get the best of both worlds without changing hull.
I've never thought about that, but makes too much sense.
Yeah. Well, and weights and balances of the boat. I mean, it probably one of the most important aspects that when you get on a boat and you're like, man, this boat, you absolutely love it. Well, you just assume you assume hull shape. You kind of assume like, man, that hull shape is great. Well, you could take the same hull shape in two boats, change the weight around extreme, and it's two different girls.
I think you could easily the Billfish or the Spencer that I worked on, it was absolutely overbuilt to the max, because Johnny's a nut and that's how he does things. And then two slips down, there's another 62 Spencer, and it's a completely different animal, because they're built more. If that boat weighed 85,000 pounds, this one weighs 65,000.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the differences they're negligible from from the dock looking at it, but I mean, the weight has so much to do with it. I feel like,
and that's how, word spreads on things of, oh man, I love this, the Spencer 62, that thing eats it up.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I was on one and I, not my cup of tea,
Yeah.
It's like, that's where that comes from, is weights and balances.
Could be who was running it and understand your weights and balances
Mm-hmm.
as well. I mean, Paul Spencer's many boats as we designed and built together. Paul, is like a Formula One race car guy on those boats. He can feel that boat, knows exactly what that boat needs, calls us back and, says, hey, we'd like to do this, that, or the other on the next one, because he's put that much time behind the wheel of that particular form with all those different weights, all those different balances.
Yeah. So interesting. So moving forward, with the idea of these incredible, being able to try to innovate, how is computational fluid dynamic systems helped or hurt, or how do you guys feel about those systems as they're introduced into the industry?
I think everybody has their own opinion on this stuff, and of course, our opinion is that it's not a fact or anything like that. Our opinion on CFDs, it has its areas. It's definitely can be utilized for some awesome stuff, and to be able, it's pretty cool to be able to run hull shapes in a computer simulation and see what they do. You'd be surprised. I would say right now it's more of a kind of like a marketing thing than anything, at least in our arena. Sportfish bottoms and stuff. We've done enough of them that we really know how, just by looking at a lines drawing, which is, I guess, to explain a lines drawing real quick, would just be, let's say your water line or your horizon lines, just take it and slice a hull like a loaf of bread. Each section, you get to see every, let's say, foot, 2 foot, up through the boat. You can do the same thing from stem to stern. And we can look at lines and say, okay, we understand how this should, react with water. Now, when we get into what's the word? Kind of more innovative or newer edgy shapes of hull bottoms and stuff, or like just trying different steps and stuff like that. It's very beneficial to use CFD to see how the fluids want to wrap or form or break, or let pressure points in certain areas, or suction loads. There's a lot of things that can be utilized from it, but we don't really find a need to use it as much as
You might think.
the market likes to.
Do you just feel like you guys been doing it long enough that it's kind of built into your head already? You kind of
Yes.
I always
see how
say
it is.
Yeah, God made the best computer, and it's right
Yeah.
between our ears. And if
Gotcha.
you put enough data in, and you've got enough thousands of hours on the water and watching, we've done hundreds and hundreds of hulls that have been sliced and trimmed, and we've done dozens of tank test models.
Mhm.
And we used to say almost the same thing about tank testing. Only tank test if somebody really needs to see something pretty different happening.
Yeah.
And what we've been doing this last year with CFD is, helping some people with some patented technology that they're trying on the bottom of the boat. And it's saved the time of having to go make multiple models. Stevenson he and his team will do different 3D models, but not having to go build physical models like the tank test models on the wall behind my head. So in that respect, it's helpful when you want to go out on a border and find an answer to some new idea. For the overwhelming majority of projects, I would say it's being used much more for marketing purposes than anything. Like we see CFD and somebody bragging about certain things that are done, are like, well, it's good marketing material.
And I'm now Dad. Yeah, Dad has obviously is way more above me when it comes to hull shapes and forms and rides on boats and stuff like that. So I still learn a lot from CFD information. But with certain sport fish, let's say standard sport fish hulls, there's the commonplace that you see when running the programs. And once you kind of understand that, you've almost seen it all. But to me, and again, being raised, hands-on,
mm-hmm.
I can stare at a computer watching, the blue and yellow and green and red, pressure from the CFD, all day long, but sitting on a boat and almost not even being at the helm, just sitting in the boat, try to get, to like, center of gravity on a boat and just kind of close your eyes and feel the ride and what's happening and listening to the noises and what's going on. I mean, you'll never beat that, I don't think.
Yeah. Speaking of center of gravity, how important is that? And, we kicked around the idea of putting a gyro in this boat for a little while, and I just couldn't bring myself to really suggest it because I felt like the center of gravity for the boat as a sea boat, when it ran through the sea at speed, was great. And I've heard people put a gyro, especially a relatively large size gyro in a boat like this, or a couple of them, and it kind of affected, although it kept the boat from rocking, it affected the ride because of the center of gravity. I mean, I think it's of utmost importance when you design a boat. I'm fortunate that this boat here has a great center of gravity, and I don't even feel like we ever really need a gyro until my guys get much older.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We spend a lot of time in our design process, literally from the concept sketches of the boat all the way through the final engineering, making sure that the owner understands that there are some limitations to what they want, that we won't allow them to slip outside of good weights and balances. And weights and balances is just a fancy way of saying keeping the center of gravity proportionate to the center of flotation or buoyancy so that the proper trim angle is achieved, that the captain can provide the best ride for the customers or the people on board. And we have seen the same thing. We've seen people go in and stick stuff in a boat, and the boat, just doesn't ride like it should anymore.
Yeah.
So it is an integral part of what you call a holistic design process. You have to be aware of it right from the get-go and hold that line until the boat is done.
Interesting. And what is your opinion on gyros? I always, my first thought is it's an amazing idea and it works. It definitely works. But how do you think it's going to affect longevity in a sport fisher that may not be built like a solid brick shit house? Is it gonna, are we gonna have issues down the road? I mean,
we've already had some issues.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would go, sure, there are older boats, that are built lighter, in a sense, or, with laminations and stuff, that somebody that's going to go put in the gyro needs to understand that and build to accommodate for that. That can all be done.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, this is an older boat. We want a gyro and, it's going to rip this thing to shit. It's not,
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. As long as whoever's going there understands laminations and understands the force,
Load transfer.
to disperse it properly. I don't see gyros going anywhere.
For sure.
They work. I can't remember the last time we did a boat that did not have a gyro. Yeah. Now, kind of like how you said earlier, the bigger horsepower now is like just putting more stuff in the boats. So now the weight limitations and stuff, now we're putting, instead of one large gyro, we're putting 2 smaller gyros in boats. And that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
I think as long as new boats are engineered to handle them and transfer the load, but the guys that I've seen installing them on existing boats, they're really beefing up because they have had some issues. They're really beefing up these older custom boats, but there will be some older boats that just should never have them in them.
Yeah. I mean,
there are some brands that were built early on that were light, high-speed boats, and they just shouldn't have them put in.
Yeah, or say, for example, you see with the boat market being what it is, you see a lot of owners buying maybe a more traditional charter boat from North Carolina or something like that, and doing a lot of retrofits with gyros and everything else. It just makes it's just not really the idea that the original boat was built, and it's just something to be aware of.
Right. Yeah. The mindset behind how that boat was built was meant to hold what was in that boat. Not so stuffing just bigger, heavier, the accommodations that these boats are used to getting now. Yes, you're on point with that for sure.
All right. Oh, cool. And then I have I usually ask a question of, like, when I'm talking to, captains or mates or owners about their best day of fishing, what maybe not their best day of fishing, but what keeps them doing what they're doing. And I guess what I'll ask you guys is what boats, if you feel like comfortable naming a couple that really excited you when you were building them and kind of keep you going, because I mean, although we all do love our jobs, it is a job, and it's not always great,
Yeah.
So
this, being a yacht designer probably has a certain persona about it that people think. For us, it's very different because we're also boat builders. The French Yachts brand is about building that which nobody else really will build right now. So
do you think that was integral in your success? The fact that you did build, you're not just a guy that draws stuff up, and you actually know how things work in boat yards and on boats and stuff like that?
I don't think I'd still be designing today if I was just an artist, illustrator, or a conceptual guy.
Mm-hmm.
It has been foundational all the way from the boatyard through my own builds. And for the last 3 years, I directed Garlington's composite shop and helping them, get back up to speed on certain things. It's because of my hands-on knowledge that my drawings and my team's drawings and 3D models and jigs make sense, because we relate to the boat builder, all their struggles, what they need to accomplish, the time constraints, the material restrictions. Yeah.
I think a lot of our builders too would agree that, utilizing us, it's not just for drawing pretty boats. It's not just for figuring out where to put engines. We talk quite a bit of construction, with our builders, and give suggestions on what we feel we have found that works really good with composites, or like lamination schedules. Like computers will tell you one thing, lamination companies will tell you another. And then there's, the personal built where you're like, well, man, that's overkill. We've done this with awesome success. We've worked with other builders that would say the same. And so there's a big peace of mind, that as a team, we're working to, make sure these boats are top notch, just not just like, hey, yeah, here's your drawings and
see you later.
Yeah.
We, obviously we're humans, we're not perfect, and we design these boats in a computer first. And I sometimes explain it as, it's almost like building the boat with your hands tied behind your back. We can try to see what builders will run into. We don't catch it all, but man, we deal with it all the time on other things where, I'm sure, like in a car, some engineer somewhere put some bolt behind some stupid
you can't
thing
get to,
that you can never get to. Well, again, we're not perfect, but we have the mindset to try to avoid that stuff because we've been there. We've been in the dust. We grind on everything and lay up whatever we can when we can. And so that's been a huge success, and Dad's background has definitely driven that.
I mean, my hands are in composites every week.
Yeah.
This last week, I finished up an aerospace project where we had to build basically a fuselage to a new type of drone over 6 feet long, and the whole thing could not weigh over 3 pounds. We came in at 2.4.
Wow.
So we can't just draw stuff and then pass it off in good conscience. That's just not who we are as people. But to answer your original question, the 86 Double Down, which was originally called by us the 86 Unleashed, it's my flagship. It's the project that I have the best memories and worst memories of, but represents probably the reason I do this. I got to meet an individual, interact with him, his captain, on exactly what they dreamed of having. And it wasn't to build a boat, have it for a year, and then turn around and sell it. They've now had that boat since 2008, I guess it is. Love the boat as much as they ever did. And it was about moving an entire industry forward by using, I brought together teams of people from all over 3 different counties and built a boat, under my name that just nobody else was willing to do. And that involved material sciences, hydrodynamics, and teams of designers collaborating ideas with people physically trying to make these things happen, including 7 world's first all carbon fiber toilets, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about today, that's just, we know how to infuse carbon fiber. Yeah, we'll go back to 2005 and try to make all the complexities of the inner workings of a toilet 7 times without one single air bubble in it.
Yeah, there's only one other boat that I know even has carbon fiber toilets, and that was only built like 4 years ago. And,
that boat's hull form was leading edge. The composites were leading edge. The styling was leading edge. The monolithic tower still isn't considered a mainstay, and yet the erector set is still the norm, and I get it. That's what people like. That's what they like. But for that owner, it was reaching out to the potential of what could be done by putting teams of people together. And that's what French Yachts has always been about. And that's what Applied Concepts loves doing the most. That's what I get the most reward out of, probably firsted only by the joy, the blessing of working with my own son, which as a father, there's no words that can explain how great that is. So
Yes, to say that because I'm sitting right here.
Yeah. And then could you delve into that boat a little bit more about what's from the outside looking in, I don't know much about it, but it looks incredible. It looks from, back then when I first saw it come into Ocean City in 08 or 09 or something like that, it was just out of this world. Now it's not that far out of this world, but it's still out there, can you explain maybe, if there's anything special with the power or, what the material sciences that you guys use?
Yeah, all the above. Part of what makes it special is it's a 1995 design. I originally drew that boat pen and ink.
Yeah.
And the original owner had to go off to the federal tennis courts, as we'll call them, for racketeering. And so the plan sat around for over 10 years. And when the owner came, he wanted something that had never, ever been done before. And as he began to describe his vision and his dream, I said, I think I have this boat. And he's like, no, something that's never been done before. And I laid out the drawings for him. He goes, that's the boat. Right? So technologically speaking, I had already built up about a decade of material science ideas about how to kill sound, lightweight, handle seas better, drive a boat faster with less horsepower, possibly make it positive flotation. Remember, my background is in small boats, and I had to do all the positive flotation calculations. I knew the Garlington 44. I did the math on that boat. Was really, really close. And so the 86 was an opportunity with a guy who it was a green light everywhere. And so as I put together the team to build this boat, I said, I believe this boat should be this, this, and this. And so this boat does encompass the first engine number 1, 2, and 3 of the 2,400 horsepower MTUs. Mm-hmm. The center engine is actually a jet drive. And this has not just, the go-go of high performance of adding the top speed, which is most efficient, when boats are doing over 40 knots, but it provides two different drivetrains, really. You have the ability to drive that boat around on just a jet and a bow thruster steering it, or kill the center engine and just have twin screws that are really far apart, so it provides really optimal steering for the captain. And it was the first sport fishing boat, to have joystick control. This was before joystick control was a thing. And we went to a company out in Louisiana that was engineering this kind of thing. And so this boat had quad computers, combined with the MTU stuff that gave it joystick capability. And in 2006-07, when we were putting all that stuff in, unheard of.
Wow.
Absolutely unheard of. It was the first boat with LCD glass all the way around, unheard of. And there are people that are going to say, I hate that boat. It's not my speed. That's fine.
Yeah.
But for the owner, that's the boat. And the captain, who interestingly said, I will never drive a boat without a steering wheel. There's no steering wheel on a boat, and he would never have one.
Wow.
So sometimes it takes that exercise. I tell people, we don't grow until we essentially jumped in the water and learned how to swim. Like nobody stands on the beach and says, okay, I finally got it by reading a book. You have to get in, and later you go, I love swimming. So that boat stretched everything. Composites, we were doing our own impregnation of resins, bought our own impreg machine. And while Tribute was fabricating the hull, we were training them on composites, which they had not done before, and working together with Gurrit, the core cell team, and that kind of stuff. It had landmark firsts all the way from the keel, the intake systems, through the engines, into the way the staterooms were CNC'd, and the honeycomb construction all the way to the monolithic carbon fiber winged tower and T-top.
That's incredible.
List of firsts on that boat would fill books.
Do they, and I'm not sure if you know this, but when they go fishing, do they just fish on the center jet drive until it's time to go chase a fish down, or how's that work? I'd love to know
Daniel says there's actually times you could do either. So you get a different water pattern.
For sure.
Propellers versus, and the boat has very shallow draft for that size boat. It was one of the first boats to be under 5 feet of draft, and you get a different water pattern. So I assume he uses them differently. We haven't talked too much at length, but he uses them differently based on what kind of fishing he's going to be doing.
Gotcha.
Their big thing is they just love big tuna. They either deep drop or go after big tuna. So,
I got you. Interesting. And Stevenson, how about you? Do you have a boat that's special, near and dear to your heart that keeps you going?
A particular boat. Let's see. No, I don't think right now I have a particular specific boat. I think what keeps me going and what really excites me is there's kind of like this transition going on where I'm starting to. Let me back up. When being with this, I've always dealt with the builders and the owners of the build companies. They're all dad's age or older. So kind of playing with it, I've just kind of been the young gun that's underneath and doing stuff. But recently there's a transition on where my generation or a little younger generation is starting to transition into being the boat builders. So to me, that's super exciting. They understand kind of the technologies or that we utilize. So we're getting to do more, via 3D and stuff than we really have in the past. There's like there's a weird transition, but it's just super exciting to start working with people my age.
A good example of that is we did a project over the last 3 years with guys. I think he's right at Stevenson's age, Triple H Cats, called Kevin, and Heath down there never flinched at many of the progressions that my generation would have said, oh, well, why would we do that? Or why would we do that? And it resulted in probably the highest performing cat as far as horsepower to weight and performance and fuel burn.
And fishability.
Because he was an open-minded guy. And that's a wide open space. And, being dad and watching two guys his age go through that project fully in 3D was super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's super fun. Like, I mean, me and John Floyd at FNS, I mean, we chat all the time.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Kind of taking the reins, from Jimmy, and I love Jimmy. I dealt with him a lot too, but it's fun just getting, the generational gap is closing, and the excitement I would get, and like Kurt Daniels with Daniels Boat Works. He's remember the name for sure. But getting to deal with this, that's what gets, that's what excites me, and really just makes this super enjoyable.
Awesome. Oh, cool. And then Steve, can you delve into how important, a boat owner that has an ambitious idea is to progressing the industry? You look at, the Double Down, and then, the next boat that I can kind of really think of is the Haruko that really pushed a lot of things. And that's almost a 20-year gap between the two of them. I mean, I'm sure there's other boats, that, the guys that push the Spencers and the FNSs that look the way they did. I mean, how is it important to have somebody who's willing to take a chance and push?
It's super important in any industry. And specifically important to the sport fishing community, because the owners are the ones with the money. We don't have but maybe one or two Howard Hugheses in our industry. We have John Bayless and say Roy Merritt, who have the ability, if they decided to do something, they could do it. And both of those guys are fairly conservative. Roy is up to something right now. I hope turns out really good. He's tending to be a little bit more progressive now. So a buyer coming along that says, I want to see a big progression is hugely important, because they're the one that provide the money to make it so.
Yeah.
Our files are filled with drawings of boats. I mean, we could stop now and just print the stuff out, and the world could build these boats for another 100 years, and probably it would feel progressive to the world.
Yeah.
So it takes that person coming along and saying, I want something different. And we understand that isn't for everybody, but let's say it's 1 in 100 or 1 in 300. When they do, that's when we see movement.
Awesome. Well, cool. If you guys don't have anything to add, we can wrap this up. I greatly appreciate you guys' time. I learned a whole hell of a lot, and been a big fan of your work for a very, very long time. And I'm glad you guys have taken the chance to really, put the pedal down and really use some imagination, because like I said, who knows where we would be if we didn't have some of those boats that really moved us along. So
I just like to say tribute to all the older guys. Sonny Briggs is going to be retiring soon. Our first CNC jig went to he and his wife. And we wouldn't be where we are today without the generation before us stepping out and saying boats could be used to fish via sport, not just commercially. So we owe a lot. I owe a lot to Richard Garlington, to Jeff Seiler, Dan McCarthy. These are the guys that mentored me along the way. So that, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yeah, well, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Stevenson. I really appreciate it. Yeah. If this provided you guys with any value or entertainment, please subscribe and share, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye.